U.S. officials left Beijing pretty much empty-handed after 2 days of trade talks. Bloomberg's Kathleen spoke to the former U.S. Secretary of State George Shultz, who says the U.S. needs to be more engaged with the world's #2 economy. He's an editor of Beyond Disruption, Technology's Challenge to Governance.
We want to be sure that we have fair trading relationships with other countries. And there's no doubt that China does some things that we ought to persuade them not to do. But if you're worried about the trade deficit, as the president seems to, you're not going to get there by milking around with the arrangements with each country. And in order to change the trade deficit, you've got to change the expenditures. And the big culprit is the huge deficit we have in the federal budget. If you had a balanced budget, you wouldn't have a trade deficit.
Well, what about exchange rates? Because the Chinese are letting their exchange rates move a little more freely now.
Exchange rates and trade arrangements are two sides of the same coin, and they both can affect particular things. But the point I was making earlier is that whatever you do on that kind of thing, you're not going to change the overall balance of trade. You have to do that by having the United States consume only the amount it produces, because it's arithmetic. If you consume more than you produce, you got to get it from somewhere. You got to import more than you export. So there it is.
What about intellectual property rights? Even the European Union and Japan have joined in on the U.S.'s complaint at the World Trade Organization, the WTO. They also feel that the Chinese are not playing according to the rules. Is that an issue?
It's a good issue, and I think it's worth working on. And it isn't going to change our trade deficit problem. But I think it's important to have a strong working relationship with the Chinese.
There seems to be a concern there that the U.S. is pulling back. Now, of course, Donald Trump is getting very much involved with the negotiations, North Korea denuclearization. But more broadly, I think it started, of course, when he said we're pulling out of the TPP. And this has been a concern with many nations like Japan.
I think he now realizes that was a mistake. And I see that he wants to get back into the TPP. It's not so easy at this point. But I think probably that will happen. It's a good thing.
Is this a trend, pulling back, do you think, from Asia that you've seen for a while? Is it a mistake the U.S. is making?
Well, there's been a lot of rhetoric like that. But we seem to be preoccupied with China, Japan, North Korea. So we're engaged heavily. And we should be.